I was standing under the canopy of a 24-hour car wash in Tampa, watching rain hammer the pavement hard enough to blur the streetlights, when the notification came through on my phone. The storm had rolled in fast off the bay. One minute the air was thick and hot. The next the sky cracked open like somebody split it with an axe. I'd pulled into the wash mostly to wait it out. My truck was already clean. I just didn't feel like driving through sheets of water with 18-wheelers spraying half the interstate into my windshield. The place smelled like wet concrete and soap. I leaned against the hood of my truck and checked my phone out of habit more than anything else. Emails from dispatch, a weather alert, then a banking notification tied to the shared financial app Kelsey and I used for household expenses. A hotel charge, beachfront property on the coast. 2 nights. At first, it barely registered. Kelsey wasted money all the time. Random shopping orders, overpriced dinners, little treat yourself. Weekends she'd swear were necessary because work stressed her out. That wasn't unusual. What stopped me cold was the payment note attached underneath the transaction. Paid by Travis M. I read it twice. Then a third time. Rain pounded the metal canopy overhead while water streamed off the edges in thick curtains. Somewhere behind me, the dryers inside the wash tunnel roared like jet engines, but suddenly everything sounded far away. Travis M. Not girl's trip. Not deposit. Not even some generic confirmation code. A name. My stomach tightened slowly, not dramatically. More like the feeling you get when your truck starts making a noise you know is going to cost you money. A minute later, my phone buzzed again. Kelsey, running late with the girls. Don't wait up. I stared at the message while rainwater rolled across the parking lot in waves. 6 years together, and I knew her rhythms better than my own. The exact tone she used when she lied. The way she over-explained little things but got strangely short when something actually mattered. That text was too clean, too prepared. And standing there under fluorescent lights with thunder rolling over Tampa, I had the strangest feeling of my life. Like I was reading a message from someone I used to know. Not my wife. Not the woman who used to sit cross-legged on our apartment floor eating takeout with me when we were broke. Not the girl who cried in my truck the first time I took her to meet my parents because she said nobody had ever treated her like family before. This version of Kelsey felt calculated, separate, almost rehearsed. I looked back down at the hotel charge and noticed something else. The reservation had been made 2 days earlier, which meant while we were eating dinner together Monday night, while she sat across from me asking if we should renew our Hulu subscription because money felt tight lately. She already had plans with another man. The rain eased slightly, softening from violent sheets into steady drops. I remember watching headlights pass on the road beyond the car wash and realizing something important at the exact same moment. People think betrayal feels explosive when it finally arrives. It doesn't. Not at first. At first it feels quiet, like a door inside you unlocking. I didn't call her. I didn't text back. I didn't demand explanations I already knew she'd lie about. Instead, I slid my phone into my pocket and stood there listening to the storm. Because deep down, beneath the anger and confusion, another feeling had already started settling in. Recognition. Small things from the past year suddenly rearranged themselves into something uglier and easier to understand. The new iPhone she claimed her friend helped her buy. The sudden obsession with keeping notifications hidden. The way she started taking her purse into the bathroom with her. Even the expensive perfume she'd begun wearing to girls' nights. I'd spent months convincing myself those things were unrelated because the alternative felt too ugly to touch. But once your mind stops protecting you, the truth moves fast. By the time the rain finally slowed enough for me to drive home, I already knew something in my life had ended. Kelsey just didn't know it yet. Before all of that, our life looked normal from the outside. I worked operations for a logistics company outside Tampa. Long hours, early mornings, constant phone calls from drivers who somehow always found new ways to turn simple deliveries into disasters. It paid well enough, though. Enough to keep the apartment comfortable and the bills covered without us having to think too hard about money. Kelsey worked reception at a dental clinic 3 days a week. At least that's what she still called it. Over time, her schedule became harder to follow. Extra shifts, staff dinners, weekend events. Women from the office I'd never actually met despite hearing their names constantly. But if someone looked at us from a distance, we probably seemed stable. We had routines. Saturday groceries. Netflix on the couch. Weekend brunch places she liked posting online because they looked expensive enough to impress strangers. The problem was, I paid for almost all of it. At first, I didn't mind. When we moved in together, Kelsey joked that she was financially hopeless. I remember laughing and telling her I was good with numbers enough for both of us. Back then it felt harmless. Then the spending started growing roots. Food delivery almost every day. Makeup orders arriving in stacks outside our door. Handbags she swore were investment pieces. Random Amazon charges she couldn't explain 2 days later. Whenever I brought it up, she had a way of turning the conversation around before I even realized what happened. You know I'm trying. You make me feel stupid about money. Sorry, I'm not some corporate robot obsessed with spreadsheets. Eventually, questioning anything became exhausting. So I stopped. If you've made it this far, this story clearly caught your attention. If you're enjoying it, drop a like on the video. It helps me see what kind of stories you want more of next. Let's keep going. That was probably my first mistake. By year 4 together, I noticed something else changing. Kelsey stopped talking about the future like we were building it together. Everything became immediate, temporary, disposable. Trips, restaurants, jewelry, experiences she could photograph. I remember one night specifically. We were sitting at the kitchen counter while I sorted bills on my laptop. Rent had gone up again, insurance too, and I was trying to figure out where we could cut back without feeling squeezed every month. Kelsey walked in holding a shopping bag from some designer store in Hyde Park. Before you get mad, she said immediately, it was on sale. That sentence told me everything before I even looked inside. $400 sunglasses. I stared at them sitting on the counter under the kitchen lights while she kept talking about discounts and reward points like those details changed the number on the receipt. What? She finally asked. I shook my head. Nothing. And that was true, because by then, I'd already trained myself not to fight battles I knew I'd lose anyway. The strange part is, looking back now, I don't think the spending itself bothered me most. It was the entitlement behind it. Kelsey stopped acting grateful a long time before I noticed she stopped acting loyal. After that night at the car wash, something inside me changed quietly. Not dramatically. I still went to work. Still answered emails. Still sat across from Kelsey at dinner while she scrolled through her phone pretending to listen whenever I talked about my day. But I stopped seeing her through the version of her I'd been protecting in my head. And once that happened, details started lining up too perfectly to ignore. The new phone she claimed one of her girlfriends basically gave her after upgrading. The random cash folded inside her purse every few days. The way every notification suddenly stayed locked. Even her body language changed once I paid attention. Kelsey used to leave her phone face up around me without thinking. Now she carried it room to room like it contained state secrets. I stopped asking questions. That surprised her more than anger would have. People get comfortable when they think they've managed your reactions. Kelsey knew how to handle suspicion, tears, deflection, turning herself into the victim until I apologized for bringing something up in the first place. What she didn't know how to handle was silence. 3 days after the hotel charge, she came home drunk from some rooftop party downtown and passed out sideways across the couch before midnight. Makeup half smeared, heels still on, one arm hanging toward the floor. I sat in the kitchen for almost an hour staring at the dark living room before finally standing up. Her tablet sat charging near the TV. For years I never touched her devices. Partly because I trusted her. Partly because I didn't want to become the kind of husband who searched through private messages looking for reasons to stay paranoid. But that version of me was already disappearing. I unlocked the tablet on the second guess. Her birthday. The messages weren't romantic. Honestly, I think that hurt worse. There were no love confessions, no emotional attachment, no guilt, just arrangements, hotel confirmations, conversations about gifts, discussions about cash transfers and dinners, and weekends away like they were business meetings. One message stopped me cold. Thursday works better. My husband thinks I'm with Ashley. I read that sentence 3 times. My husband. Not my name. Not me. Just a role in the background of her schedule. I kept scrolling while rain tapped softly against the apartment windows outside. Different men. Different conversations. Same tone every time. Detached. Transactional. Like I wasn't reading messages from the woman I loved. I was reading the schedule of someone running a side business. And the strangest part was how calm I felt once the shock wore off. Not because it didn't hurt. Because the confusion finally ended. For the first time in months, everything made sense. I didn't wake her up after reading the messages. That surprised even me. Kelsey stayed asleep on the couch while the television flickered silently across the room, blue light washing over her face every few seconds like police lights passing through fog. One heel had fallen onto the carpet sometime during the night. Her wineglass still sat half full on the coffee table beside her phone. For a long time, I just stood there holding the tablet. 6 years together. Vacations. Holidays. Shared rent. Conversations about getting married someday once things settled down financially. And somehow all of it had split open quietly behind my back, while I kept showing up to work every morning thinking I was building a future with someone. I placed the tablet back exactly where I found it. No screenshots. No confrontation. No dramatic moment where I shook her awake demanding answers she'd already rehearsed anyway. By then, I understood something important. People who live double lives become experts at surviving conversations. They know how to stall, redirect, cry at the right moments, admit just enough truth to stop you from digging deeper. I didn't want explanations anymore. I wanted distance. The next morning I left earlier than usual for work. Tampa traffic was still light, dawn barely pushing through the clouds from the night before. The roads looked washed clean after the storm. I called a divorce attorney from the interstate. The woman who answered sounded calm and professional, like men called her every day while driving to work after discovering their marriages were built on lies. Maybe they did. She asked basic questions first. Length of relationship, shared accounts, joint property, children. No kids, I said. The silence after that felt strange, almost lucky. When the call ended, I sat in my truck in the parking lot outside the warehouse for another 10 minutes before going inside. Not because I was emotional, because something inside me had gone completely quiet. Up until then, part of me still imagined some version of reconciliation. A conversation where Kelsey finally told the truth. Maybe cried. Maybe admitted she was lost or unhappy or confused. That fantasy disappeared during the drive. I stopped thinking about saving the relationship. Stopped wondering whether she still loved me somewhere underneath all the lies. Stopped trying to understand why she became this person. None of it mattered anymore. What mattered was preparation. That became my focus after that morning. I opened a separate checking account 3 days later. Changed passwords. Pulled copies of financial records. Little practical steps that felt cold at first until I realized coldness was the only reason I could function at all. Meanwhile, Kelsey acted like life was perfectly normal. That was the strangest part. She still kissed me goodbye before work. Still sent grocery lists. Still asked if I could cover her credit card payment, just until next month. And every time she smiled at me across the apartment, I felt further away from her than I ever thought possible. After that, I stopped reacting and started observing. Kelsey mistook my silence for ignorance at first. I could see it in the way she relaxed around me again, like she'd survived the dangerous part, and things were settling back into normal. She went back to leaving makeup scattered across the bathroom counter. Started humming while getting dressed for work again. Asked me one night if I thought we should take a weekend trip together to reconnect. I almost laughed when she said it. Instead, I told her work had been busy. That answer seemed to disappoint her more than anger would have. The strange thing about betrayal is how predictable people become once you stop listening to their words and start watching patterns instead. Every Thursday, she suddenly worked late. Every Monday, there were new purchases somewhere. Shoes, jewelry, restaurant charges. Once, a spa receipt from Clearwater she tried to bury beneath grocery transactions like I wouldn't notice. I noticed all of it now. One Tuesday night, we were eating takeout at the kitchen island when her phone buzzed beside her plate. The reaction happened before she could stop it. Her entire body tightened. She grabbed the phone so quickly she nearly knocked over her drink. Then she deleted the message immediately. I pretended not to see. But after that moment, she started studying me differently across the apartment. Longer looks. Random questions. Are you okay lately? You seem distant. Did I do something wrong? The irony almost exhausted me. At work, my routine stayed exactly the same. Early mornings at the logistics yard, drivers complaining about routes, endless spreadsheets, and shipping delays. But mentally, I had already started separating myself from my life with her piece by piece. I stopped talking about future plans, stopped discussing vacations, stopped arguing about money. And the calmer I became, the more nervous Kelsey seemed. That's what finally convinced me guilt had been living inside her long before I found proof. People think liars are fearless. Most of them aren't. They just depend on noise and emotion to keep other people confused. Once things become quiet, they start hearing themselves clearly for the first time. One Friday evening, she came home carrying expensive sushi and a bottle of wine I knew she couldn't afford herself. "Thought we could have a nice night together," she said carefully. I looked at the wine label. $200 minimum. Probably purchased by someone else before it reached my kitchen counter. I smiled anyway and helped her set the table. Because by then, I understood something she didn't. I wasn't gathering evidence anymore. I was already leaving her in my head. The situation stopped feeling private the moment other people's names started appearing beside hers. Up until then, I could almost pretend this was just another collapsing relationship. Two people drifting apart. One person lying longer than the other realized. But once finances, co-workers, and family entered the picture, everything became heavier. More permanent. It started with her sister, Amanda. Kelsey and Amanda had always been close in that exhausting way siblings sometimes are. Matching Instagram captions. Weekend brunches. Inside jokes nobody else understood. Amanda treated Kelsey less like a sister and more like a reflection of herself. One Saturday afternoon, I stopped by Amanda's townhouse to drop off a charger Kelsey forgot during one of their wine nights. Amanda answered the door looking startled enough to confirm something before either of us spoke. "You're here alone?" she asked immediately. That question stayed with me all the way back to my truck. Later that night, after Kelsey fell asleep, I checked our shared phone records online for the first time. Amanda's number appeared constantly during the same nights Kelsey supposedly stayed with the girls. Long calls, late hours, coordinated timelines. Her sister hadn't just known. She'd helped manage the lies. A week later, another piece surfaced by accident. I was reviewing joint banking statements when I noticed repeated payments from a name I recognized immediately. Older guy, cosmetic dentist. One of the doctors from Kelsey's clinic. At first I assumed it was reimbursement for office expenses or something equally harmless. Then I saw the pattern. Hotel charges followed by transfers. Luxury stores followed by deposits. Everything moved in cycles precise enough to make my stomach tighten. I searched his name online during lunch break at work. Married. 2 kids. Board member at some local charity. The kind of man who smiled confidently in professional headshots because consequences had probably never touched him before. That was the moment the situation stopped feeling emotional and started feeling administrative. Bank representatives began calling about suspicious spending. My attorney requested financial disclosures. I opened separate accounts and redirected direct deposits quietly before Kelsey noticed. Every conversation became about numbers. Lease obligations, shared debt, asset division. It amazed me how quickly betrayal transformed from secret excitement into paperwork once reality entered the room. Meanwhile, Kelsey kept pretending life was stable, still posting coffee selfies online, still complaining about stress at work, still asking whether I could transfer money for her car payment until payday. And every time she smiled at me across the apartment, I wondered how many people she believed would protect her forever once all this finally became real. I told her everything on a Wednesday evening in the kitchen. No shouting, no dramatic build-up, just quiet. Kelsey was standing at the counter scrolling through her phone while reheating leftovers. Rain tapped softly against the apartment windows again, almost identical to the storm the night everything started. For a second, I actually noticed how ordinary the moment looked. That felt fitting somehow. Most endings don't arrive cinematically. They arrive during small routines people assume will continue forever. "I spoke to a lawyer," I said. She froze immediately. Not dramatically, just enough. The microwave hummed behind her while she slowly turned around, holding a plate neither of us would touch afterward. "What?" I stayed seated at the kitchen island. Calm, tired more than angry. "I know about the hotels, the money, the men from the clinic." For a moment, she stared at me like she genuinely believed I might still be bluffing. Then she laughed, a quick nervous sound that didn't belong in the room. "Okay, seriously, what are you talking about?" I didn't answer right away. That silence changed her expression faster than any accusation could have. "You went through my stuff?" she asked quietly. Interesting. Not denial. Not confusion. Just immediate concern about what I'd seen. "I know enough," I said. The apartment suddenly felt smaller. Kelsey set the plate down carefully beside the sink, buying herself time. I watched her start calculating in real time which version of the truth might still save her. "Nothing happened," she said finally. You're making this into something insane. I nodded once. All right. That response unsettled her immediately. People expect conflict when they're cornered. My calmness forced her to sit alone with her own words instead. They were gifts, she continued quickly. Clients flirt sometimes. That's literally part of working front desk in a cosmetic clinic. Men spend money. It doesn't mean anything happened. Still calm. Still quiet. I think that frightened her more than anger would have. Because somewhere during those weeks, I stopped behaving like her husband and started behaving like someone already leaving. You talked to a lawyer? She asked again, softer this time. Yes. The room went silent except for rain against the windows. Then her voice changed completely. Tears arrived fast after that. Explanations. Promises. The familiar emotional collapse people reach once denial stops working. She said she was unhappy, confused, lonely. Said we could fix things if I gave her a chance to explain everything properly. I listened without interrupting. Not because I believed her. Because I finally understood none of it mattered anymore. By the end, she was crying against the kitchen counter asking whether I still loved her. And for the first time in 6 years, I honestly didn't know how to answer. The divorce moved faster than I expected once the paperwork started. My attorney told me that usually meant one of two things. Either both people were emotionally exhausted already, or one person realized fighting would expose too much they wanted hidden. In Kelsey's case, it was probably both. She kept the apartment, mostly because I no longer wanted anything inside it. The couch where she answered hidden messages beside me. The kitchen where she cried after I confronted her. Even the bedroom felt contaminated somehow, like the walls themselves had listened to lies long enough to absorb them. She also kept her Dodge Charger. That mattered to her more than almost anything else by the end. Kelsey loved that car in a way that always seemed strange to me. Constant photos beside it. Endless detailing appointments. Social media captions about finally living the life I deserve. I signed the paperwork without arguing. At that point, peace felt more valuable than possessions. For the first month after the divorce, I still heard things about her occasionally through mutual friends. Expensive dinners downtown. Trips to Miami. Different men appearing in photos before disappearing again 2 weeks later. But slowly, the stories changed tone. The dinners stopped first. Then the vacations. Then her Instagram became quieter. No more rooftop cocktails or luxury shopping bags spread across restaurant tables. No more filtered selfies talking about energy and abundance, like life was an endless rewards program. Reality had finally entered the room. One afternoon, nearly 4 months after everything ended, Amanda called me unexpectedly. I almost ignored it. Instead, I answered. Her voice sounded tense immediately. Have you heard about Kelsey's car? No. Silence. Then she exhaled sharply. It's gone. At first I thought she meant repossessed. But Amanda explained what happened slowly, like she still didn't fully believe it herself. A violent thunderstorm rolled through Tampa overnight. Flooding. Wind damage. Power outages across half the city. Sometime between midnight and sunrise, Kelsey's Charger disappeared from the apartment parking lot. No witnesses. No usable security footage because rain distorted most of the cameras. Nothing. Insurance won't cover it, Amanda said quietly. That surprised me more than the theft itself. Why not? Another pause. She let the policy expire months ago. I leaned back in my chair at work staring through the warehouse office window while forklifts moved shipments below me. The same car she once photographed like a trophy had vanished overnight because she stopped paying insurance while still pretending online everything was perfect. Amanda kept talking, mostly venting frustration, but eventually her voice faded into background noise. Because suddenly I understood something strange. Life rarely destroys people all at once. Usually it happens slowly. Missed payments, bad decisions, small dishonesties repeated long enough to become a lifestyle. And eventually one storm arrives at exactly the wrong moment. When I heard the full story about the Charger, I expected to feel something stronger than I did. Satisfaction maybe. Resentment finally settling into relief. Instead, I just sat alone in my office after Amanda's call ended, listening to warehouse machinery humming through the walls while rainwater still dripped outside from the storm the night before. And strangely enough, I felt calm. Not happy. Definitely not vindicated. Just finished. For months after the divorce, part of me stayed mentally attached to Kelsey without realizing it. Not emotionally attached in the way people imagine. I didn't miss her anymore. I didn't want her back, but some small piece of my attention still followed her life from a distance like a habit my brain hadn't fully broken yet. Mutual friends mentioning her name, random social media posts appearing online, Amanda texting occasionally whenever some new crisis happened. I never searched for updates myself, but information still reached me anyway. Until the car disappeared. Something about that story closed the last open door in my head. Maybe because the Charger represented everything Kelsey spent years chasing. The image, the appearance of success, the illusion that consequences only happened to other people. And now it was simply gone, swallowed by one violent night and a series of ignored responsibilities. A week later, I drove past her old apartment complex by accident while heading home from work. Moving trucks filled half the parking lot. I noticed her balcony furniture missing first. Then the empty parking space where the Charger used to sit. No music, no parties, no glowing Instagram version of the life she thought she deserved. Just another apartment in another building under another gray Florida sky. I kept driving. That was the moment I realized I hadn't checked her social media in weeks. I hadn't asked mutual friends about her either. Somewhere along the line, curiosity disappeared without me noticing. Everything that needed to happen already had. The lies surfaced. The marriage ended. The fantasy collapsed under its own weight. And the strange part was, none of it felt dramatic anymore. Just inevitable. That night, I stopped at a gas station outside Tampa Bay and watched another storm building far out over the water, dark clouds folding into each other above the highway. For the first time in a long while, I didn't think about Kelsey at all on the drive home. Sometimes I still drive past that car wash in Tampa where everything started. The canopy lights still buzz the same way at night. Water still rushes across the pavement during storms. Truck drivers still sit inside their vehicles waiting for rain to pass like the world outside can't touch them for a few extra minutes. Every time I pass it, I think about how ordinary that moment looked before my life split into two versions. Before I knew. The strange thing is, I don't hate Kelsey anymore. Hate takes energy, and eventually I realized she'd already spent enough of mine. What stays with me instead is the lesson underneath all of it. People rarely destroy their lives with one terrible decision. Usually it happens through smaller choices repeated over and over while they convince themselves consequences are something distant, something negotiable, until one day they look around and realize the damage finally became real. And by then, nobody is left willing to help them carry it. That's the end of this story. If you made it all the way here, consider subscribing to stay with us. I've placed a couple of recommended videos on screen for you. Pick one and keep watching. I'll see you in the next story.